I'm Lee C. Camp, and this is No Small Endeavor, exploring what it means to live a good life.
When you have to be good to belong, then you don't want to face your own demons. You don't want to face your own unhealthy patterns. I certainly didn't.
That's four-time New York Times bestselling author Jen Hatmaker discussing her new book, Awake, a memoir of reinvention and recovery.
What would I have to reckon with? What would I be left with if I was that transparent and truthful about my own failures?
We discuss the painful process of self-discovery, the courage it takes to change, and what it means to begin again.
I just surrendered and went, I cannot white knuckle this thing anymore. I can't achieve my way out of this. I cannot work hard enough to make us healthy and whole. I just laid it down.
All coming right up. Hey friend, if you didn't know, I started a newsletter a while back that comes out every 2 weeks. I've been delighted to hear from so many of you about positive response to the newsletter. We call it the No Small Endeavor Notebook, where I riff on themes and topics related to our podcast, giving you additional material for thinking and doing in your own quest to make sense of what it might mean to live a good life. Join us by going now to nosmallendeavor.com and sign up there. Again, go to nosmallendeavor.com to sign up now for our free No Small Endeavor Notebook newsletter. So the last 2 weeks have been a blur. A conference in Dallas, a few days back in Nashville, out in Utah, where I got a day to myself to hike in the Wasatch Mountains, then a conference in Salt Lake City, then back to Nashville to tape 5 hours of interviews in the next 2 days. And you know what I've taken with me on those travels, packed in my bags? My cachava. I kid you not. I love my cachava. In the midst of all that craziness, it kept me well nourished, mind and body. And I really do like it so much that I look forward to it. Find myself telling myself, oh wait, you can have your cachava in about an hour. As you've heard me say before, a serving has 25 grams of 100% plant-based protein, plus 6 grams of fiber, and with every 2 scoops of cachava, you get 85 plus superfoods, nutrients, and plant-based ingredients. No artificial flavors, colors, or sweeteners, non-GMO, no soy, no animal products, no gluten, and no preservatives. So, rethink your definition of fast food. And they just launched a new flavor, strawberry, with real freeze-dried strawberry. You've never tasted strawberry like this. Go to kachava.com and use code NSE for 15% off your next order. That's Kachava, KACHAVA.com, code NSE for 15% off. I can sometimes find it a challenge to get to sleep. I need to make sure to do my bedtime reading, practice a bit of gratitude for the gifts of the day, and then I intentionally relax the muscles in my face. And then it's so exquisitely pleasurable to have our set of Bowl and Branch's signature sheets. They're made free from toxins with the finest 100% organic cotton. They come with a 30-night worry-free guarantee and are ethically crafted by expert artisans that earn fair wages. I loved the way they felt when I pulled them out of the package, and I love the way they feel as I drift off to sleep. So why tarry? Feel the difference an extraordinary night's sleep can make with Bowl and Branch. Get 15% off plus free shipping on your first set of sheets at bowlandbranch.com/NSE. That's Bowl and Branch, BOLLAND, branch.com/NSE to save 15% and unlock free shipping. Exclusions apply. I'm Lee C. Camp. This is No Small Endeavor, exploring what it means to live a good life.
I was married for 26 years. Got married when I was 19. I was a sophomore in college.
Jen was a pastor's daughter. She was marrying Brandon, who was a pastor's son. In time,
we have 5 kids, 3 biological, 2 adopted. He was a pastor, church planters, the whole thing.
Ask Jen about how she sees herself, her work. She says,
I'm an author. That's probably the lead horse in my race. Written, I'm not honestly sure, 14 or 15 books. And that was always what I wanted to do. That's what I set out to do.
And she did. In 2006, Jen published her first book, A Modern Girl's Guide to Bible Study. And shortly thereafter, she and Brandon founded Austin New Church.
People are like, well, can you come speak at our thing? And I'm like, do you think I can? Did somebody tell you that I could? I don't know. So I developed the muscle of being a speaker alongside my writing career.
And Jen's stardom rose.
In the first half of my career, in, I guess, what would be considered evangelical women's subculture.
4 New York Times bestsellers, a show on HGTV as she and Brandon remodel an old Texas farmhouse.
And then I've got a podcast.
Along with something like 1.5 million social media followers.
In July of 2020, I woke up in the middle of the night and heard him in bed next to me voice texting his girlfriend.
It's been 5 years since that night, but she could not say it without emotion. She woke up to hear her husband of 26 years lying in bed next to her, voice texting his girlfriend.
It was the end of my life as I knew it. It was.
That's how Jen's new memoir begins.
I decided to take a pretty candid look at the systems that I have been a part of, that I've been handed, the narratives I've been handed my whole life that built that house. And so I decided to look at those brick by brick by brick. And to be honest, just concluded that maybe it wasn't such a surprise that the house crumbled after all.
Today, our interview with Jen Hatmaker. Jen Hatmaker, hello, welcome.
Delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
I think it's a beautiful book.
Thank you. It's a really nice thing to say.
I found it moving and transparent and honest in ways that couldn't have always been comfortable for you. And it's a sort of transparency that I think that invites the reader to ask some questions maybe that they might have been reticent to ask. And I thank you for that. Early on, you say that kind of the first thing that you do is call an attorney. And you said that you just followed your intuition. And you kind of leave this hint that there's much more to be said about that at that point you didn't investigate why you followed your intuition rather than calling, and I would have supposed in this mind, calling the church or calling your friends at church or whatever, but you call the attorney. And that, I think, sets up this one thread that runs throughout, is this learning to pay attention to the body and learning to pay attention to intuition. But maybe first, could you set up for us, why do you think for you there is this lack of trust in intuition or this lack of trust in the body?
That's a real through line in the story, is reinventing my relationship with my own body, including my own intuition and wisdom and gut. I was raised in a really traditional, conservative, religious space. I kind of came up, for those of your listeners who know, through the Southern Baptist world. My dad was a very rogue pastor, but
it's a very lovely picture of your dad in the book. Yes.
Yeah, he's the best.
Yeah.
Like I really honestly have the best parents, but that was my faith environment. And in that world, particularly coming up through the 80s, 90s, I was taught that my body, my feelings, my perception, my desires were fully untrustworthy, that I was absolutely not a reliable source of authority in my own life. In fact, we were taught overtly to outsource all of our authority. So it was up to everybody else to tell us what to do, how to act, what to believe, how to live. In fact, we were taught to actively distrust our instincts. If we really wanted something, that should raise a red flag. That could be perceived as worldly or selfish. That is the S word in evangelical upbringing, is being selfish, particularly for girls. Girls are meant to have complete self-erasure in service of everybody else around us. That's the role that we were mostly handed, and anything outside of complete servitude and subservience was deemed selfish and self-serving and prideful. That was the P word. And so I had a very tumultuous relationship with my own body, including my own instincts. When you are told from the time you are in second grade that you are inherently bad and that you are just desperately in need of someone to save you from your own wickedness, that is a worldview that is very hard to reverse. When I lost my marriage, my brain was a poisonous loop of shock and grief and trauma, and I'd seen things I couldn't unsee, and I just could not escape it. And so for maybe the first time in my life, I went to my body and went, I wonder if my body might be a more gentle guide through this season of life. And so I had new practices that I put into place. I worked with energy specialists and healers and acupuncture, meditation, guided meditation became my number one tool to talk me out of being in my head and get me back into my body. And it was a transformative experience. I'm still learning to experience the world through the trustworthiness of my own body, which is like a whole new day for me.
One way you summarize in one line some of the stuff that you just said about distrust, you said that you learned, I cannot trust a single thing I think or want. And the way then all of pleasure or desire, they are seen as untrustworthy to be sacrificed. And the way in which that takes this sort of religious form or a pietistic form. And I noticed even that you talk about when you were a young girl journaling and you would write things like, Jesus, nothing else matters. And then you say at one point, wait a second, a lot of stuff else matters. You want to unpack any of that for us?
Yeah. The language of the hymns when I was growing up. And then later, the language of the modern praise and worship songs. They're highly, and meant to be, highly emotive. They are meant to stir passion and a heart. And then you get in a room full of people and you have this group experience. And so worship songs and music can be so highly emotional. But when I was like, wait a minute, I am saying things with all my heart in the pew on a Sunday, I want nothing but you, God. I don't need anyone or anything but you. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't actually feel that way. And not because I'm a heretic, but the truth of a human life is that a lot of things matter. And so I just started going, wow, if I'm going to say words to God, I at least want them to be sincere. I suspect he can handle it. I suspect that I can come candid and that God won't fall out of the sky. I think I'm in this season of life where I am taking, I think it's fair to say, a critical look at organized religion in general and all the spokes of the wheel and go, what feels true to me? What feels meaningful? What feels genuine? Versus what is geared toward an emotional experience and performing faith. And so I find myself in a really interesting sort of limbo right now.
So I can imagine some people being critical and saying, well, you're setting your feelings over the will of God. What's your response to somebody that might reply like that?
I would almost turn it around. And so I would ask that critic, are you putting your feelings before the will of God? Is some of the modern response to God swept up in emotive, demonstrative, performative group experiments? I'm okay with that criticism. I can weather that for sure. I think what I'm more interested in is my own faith, not what someone else thinks about it. I'm 51. And I think what I am craving right now, I'm a lifer. I told you, lifer. Pastor's daughter, pastor's wife for 26 years, church planner. I was a pastor, preacher, teacher, Bible study writer. I know all the language. I know all the rules. I know all the boundaries. And I don't speak as one who doesn't understand insider language and insider practices that are expected if you would like to protect your belonging. But I just think at this age, I am looking for something that feels absolutely true and sincere. I read an interview with Dr. Dallas Willard, who was an eminent theologian and teacher and a brilliant person and thinker. And the interviewer said, Dr. Willard, if you could describe Jesus using only one word, what would you choose? And his answer was relaxed. And I remember reading that going, what? Relaxed? The God and the Jesus that I grew up with, they were not relaxed a second of a minute of a day. Like, I was taught that they were tight, that they were fragile, that they were arbitrary, punitive for sure, watching, definitely, keeping score, 100%. And when he said relaxed, I'm like, I don't know if I know Jesus right. And so at this stage in my life, I can genuinely say the way that I feel about Jesus is relaxed. If that means people say, hey, she's just putting her feelings above this, that, or the other, I'm okay. I'll accept that. I'll receive that, because I feel like what I am discovering now that I have lost what I thought were God's two favorite institutions, marriage, obviously, and now the church, organized religion. And I still feel this connected, centering, gentle, divine presence. That's relaxing. So I no longer feel the need to perform and to hit all my marks like somebody else would like me to.
Let me ask one more question under body before we move on. And so if you could give us a few minutes about the way in which the body and patriarchy plays a role in your book.
I can speak to that specifically as a woman with a body. Although embodiment certainly is non-gendered. The process of being in touch with our own intuition and wisdom is for every human person. But in terms of being a woman, and this is very layered for me, the body narrative that I grew up in was incredibly harmful. Everything about our bodies was meant to appease and please and attract men. And of course, that also was a wandering target. It changed by the decade. One decade, we're supposed to be rail thin, androgynous almost, right? And then the next decade, we're supposed to be curvy. And then, of course, I came up through the aerobicized athletic body. But it didn't matter, because not only were we expected to fit the mold, but then there's this giant industry going, give us your money and we'll help you get there. And so I have been thusly at war with my body from the time I was little. I can't remember a time when I thought my body was beautiful, trustworthy, good. We were instructed that sexual purity was paramount and sex was for marriage and marriage only. And the way in which that was taught to us was absolutely packaged in a great deal of shame and fear. And so baked into the sauce early on was like, whoa, this body can get me in trouble with God, which was terrifying, in trouble with my parents, in trouble with the church, in trouble with my community. And so I don't feel like I had a good word said to me about my body until I was in my 40s. And women started going, I wonder if there's a different way we can consider. So that has been very recent work in my adult life. And I'm finding the reversal incredibly restorative and also so very hard. You're listening to No Small Endeavor and our conversation with Jen Hatmaker.
I love hearing from you. Tell us what you're reading, who you're paying attention to, or send us feedback about today's episode. You can reach me at lee@nosmallendeavor.com. You can get show notes for this episode in your podcast app or wherever you listen. These notes include links to resources mentioned in this episode and a full transcript. We would be delighted and most appreciative if you would tell your friends about No Small Endeavor and invite them to join us on the podcast, because that helps extend the reach of the beauty, truth, and goodness we are seeking to sow in the world. Coming up, Jen and I discuss a moment that changed everything. Hello friends, Lee Camp here. Last week in Salt Lake City, I met a station manager from a small town who's given her life to serving her community through public radio. Now, because of massive funding cuts, station managers like her are wondering if they may have to turn off the mic for good. Larger stations are slashing budgets too, cutting the very programming that keeps us connected and often inspired. As a podcast listener, you may or may not know that No Small Endeavor is aired weekly on roughly 100 stations throughout the country. And given the current financial crisis for public radio, we at No Small Endeavor want to help. We're extending the time public radio stations can air our show for free, and we are asking you to join us. For as little as $5 a month, you can help keep No Small Endeavor on the air from Anchorage, Alaska to Jacksonville, Florida. Consider making it more, because by doing so, you're helping spread a bit more beauty, truth, and goodness to communities nationwide. Go to nosmallendeavor.com and click Join NSE Plus today. Help keep the airwaves alive with NSE.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? But with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers, a network of 130 million of them, in fact. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills, and did I say job title? See how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
A second thread that runs throughout your narrative is the truth and seeking to acknowledge the truth. And you say at one point you wanted the story of your marriage instead of your marriage. Unpack some of that for us about how coming to terms with acknowledging truth was such a significant development in your recent story.
That took me a couple of years. Thank goodness I did not write this book 3 years ago. It's been 5 years, and I needed every day of that. Initially, right after the discovery process blew up my life and my marriage, and it was an overnight ending. And so I think that year, my preferred version of the story was very stereotypical and tidy, villain victim. This person made all these choices, blew up our marriage. This was done to me. I'm innocent. He's the villain. That got me through the day. And of course, that's what everybody else was telling me. So it was a very agreed upon storyline. But I took myself immediately to therapy because I was so sunk. And, therapists are the worst. I don't know if I'm the only one who knows it. But, I went to therapy so she could just tell me how terrible a person he was and how sad it was that he was mean to such a nice girl like me. And, of course, they're just fixated on your own deal and your patterns and your impulses. And so forced into a much higher degree of self-awareness as I began really getting honest with myself. It had to start there and went, all right, let me examine my complicity here. After 26 years, that's a long time together. Where did I contribute to the disconnection? Where were the parts of our marriage that just constantly were rubbing and we just could not get it right. What did I put into the soup pot that was complicit to what became a failing marriage? And, those questions I began to answer with truthfulness. It is not an excuse that my ex-husband had a whole second life that I had no idea about. That is still a terrible way to lose a marriage. And I am not saying that I deserved it, but I am able now to say, we were in trouble. We were in trouble. I knew it. Going back to our original line of discussion, which was sort of intuition, my body knew. I had so many red flags flying. Something was so clearly wrong. And I was like, I am not interested in facing that. I don't want to know what's on the other side of those questions. I don't want to know it. As you mentioned, I want the story of my marriage, not my actual marriage. And so the truth is that we had had a really hard 2 years, and we had lost the threads of respect and connection that keeps any marriage on the rails. And that's just true. It's hard to admit that because at first, at least, I felt like that was me offering absolution for unforgivable behavior. But that's not actually true. What it is just honest, because wherever I go, there I am. So if I am unwilling to examine my own patterns, which include codependency, it includes an avoidant attachment style, which means when I feel threatened, when I am in conflict, I go quiet. I recede, I withdraw, and which is just actually a form of control. I am trying to control the scenario with a lack of engagement. That's mine. So I'm either going to address that or I'm going to walk that straight into my next relationship. I'm going to continue those patterns with my children, with my friends, with my family members. And so I did get the gift of self-examination. And I hope that I've been honest about what I have faced and am still facing.
I've used for years an essay from theologians Stanley Hauerwas and David Burrell, in which they talk about self-deception. And I've always found it to be really a fascinating article. And they claim that self-deception requires a policy of a refusal to give an account for some part of one's life.
It's a great definition.
How do you respond to that, given some of your experience there with not wanting to look at that part of your life?
Feels so relatable. It's always been really important to me to protect my belonging in the community, to be good. Being good was one of the top rungs of the ladder. I've always felt like I needed to be unimpeachable, that the way God felt about me particularly depended on how good or not good I was. And then, of course, we've got this actual community that is willing to be punitive if your behavior falls outside the lines of good. So being good has always felt urgent to me. It felt necessary that's where my value would come from. And anything outside of being good just felt catastrophic to me. And I did not know how to handle that. And so that is a great enemy of self-awareness. When you have to be good to belong, then you don't want to face your own demons. You don't want to face your own unhealthy patterns. I certainly didn't. What would that mean for me? What then would I have to reckon with? What would I be left with if I was that transparent and truthful about my own failures, like the own sort of garbage parts of my personality and behaviors? That felt scary. That felt too consequential. And I didn't want to get there.
It's almost like faith, or maybe more specifically, that kind of faith sets oneself up to be duplicitous, in the sense that you have much more at stake in acknowledging your failures, right? You have much more at stake in letting people see that you're not all that.
I think that's a great analysis, and I think that's true. And that is reinforced by what we observe and our experiences, because trust me, I have watched plenty of faith leaders or people in a really visible space falter or fail, and the community is unkind. So it's real. Like, it's not an imagined concern that misbehavior will threaten your belonging. It will. And we've seen it happen more times than we can ever count. I think that's also why we end up seeing such a devastating consistency of really well-known, prominent faith leaders living a dark, private, secret life, because they're not involved in a community that would welcome their struggles or their humanity.
The whole structure of your memoir, I would think in some ways might be characterized as one way to think about grief, the first initial overwhelm of this horrific loss that unsettles everything, and then these waves of forward, backward, and the different shape the forward and the backward might take. But what would you say you've learned about grief or the process of grief over the last 5 years?
Oh boy. I structured Awake. It's not in chapters, as you know. It's written in vignettes, which I wrote each of those in first person in real time. And so it's just in sections. The first section is called the end. And then we have the middle. And then the last third is called the beginning. And the first third and a big chunk of the middle were the moments and the memories and the small experiences of grief. That was so painful to write. It was so hard to go back and pull all of those moments back out and just lay them on the page. My body is the way that I was finally able to process grief. I was trying to work it out in my brain with my thoughts. Let me think my way into healing, not even to healing. God, that felt so impossibly far away at the beginning. I didn't even know if I'd ever get there, but I thought, let me think my way to analyze how on earth this happened. How did I get here? I had all the tools. I followed all the scripts. We did all the things. We absolutely nailed the template. And here we still are. Let me see if I can analyze it. And I just couldn't do it. Everything was too traumatic. And so it was actually my body in which I finally experienced grief, when I just bypassed my mind entirely and let my body howl with sorrow. And I did not try to fix that or tamp that down. I didn't set a timer. You can cry for 10 minutes. I let my body just feel every bit of pain that I was actually feeling. I learned, this was through therapy and through teachers and healers and body experts. It took a village to teach me how to be in my body for grief. But I did learn how to stop resisting it. All I'd ever done is resist hard feelings. I am bad at hard feelings. That is not my best category, which made me a hard partner. If you are unable to face pain, discomfort, disagreement, whatever it is, just clear-eyed and with truthfulness, with candor, you are a very difficult partner to work with. And so I've been such a lifelong pain resistor, talking myself right out of it. No, we don't have time for that. Think about the good things, this sort of toxic positivity, just to pull myself up and over that mountain that I did not want to actually climb. And so it was my body actually feeling feelings, actually crying tears, actually screaming out loud without any resistance on my part. My teachers taught me, go really soft, go as soft as you can, release your forehead and your jaw, your shoulders, unclench your hands. And every time I would go through that, body Rolodex. Everything was as tight as it could possibly be. Like, I was like levitating practically off my chair. I was so clenched. And so like learning the practice of going really soft, going really gentle, letting feelings come, knowing that they will go and I will live, was a revelation, an absolute revelation. And it was really that practice that I think finally began the uptick of healing for me.
Coming up is a short break, followed by our discussion on codependency recovery and the long road to self-compassion.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
When your investors, customers, and workers demand more from your business, make it happen with SAP. The AI-powered capabilities of SAP can help you streamline costs, connect with new suppliers, and manage payroll, even when your business is being pulled in different directions. To deliver a quality product at a fair price while paying your people what they're worth too, so your business can stay unfazed. Learn more at sap.com/uncertainty.
The next question I'm going to ask, I was going to first qualify it with the qualifier, I can be sentimental or I can be overly sensitive. So with all that said, I want to put it this way. I cried when I read your chapter on Dr. Ahmadi. And I think I cried because I could relate to, in that chapter, the grief of caring for one's child while you're also dealing with your own grief and loss. It was just such a beautiful kind of moment where I heard him saying to you this invitation again to accept that we are embodied creatures and you can only take so much so long. And then at some point, you just have to love yourself enough to say, okay, I've got to figure out how to take care of myself. Thoughts about that scene or what I just shared there?
Thank you so much for just sharing that. When I think about Dr. Ahmadi, my heart is so full of love and gratitude. And for everybody listening, this was a moment in the story in which my psyche and body broke essentially on the same day that my daughters did. And we were just in such trouble. Our year had just been so traumatic. And she ended up in the care of helpers and doctors. And the second I knew she was safe, my body fell apart. My mom and sister had to come pick me up and take me to the emergency room. And I found myself in the care of an angel, Dr. Ahmadi, who he was so gentle and just said, your body's done all it can do. Like, she carried you this far and she got you through the worst of it. And she's run on fatigue for too long and pain. And it's time to care for your body now in the way that you've tried to be caring for everybody else in this story for a year. It had been a year. And that was the day that I went on blood pressure medicine. That is the day that I went on antidepressants. That is the day that I was handed anti-anxiety meds as needed. And he said to me, it's time to pull yourself out of the arena. This is imperative. That really and truly was the pivot moment in which I just surrendered and went, I cannot white knuckle this thing anymore. I can't achieve my way out of this. I cannot work hard enough to make us healthy and whole. And I just laid it down and went, okay, whatever it takes to get my beloved daughter healthy and well and stable, and for me. And that summer, we both recovered. And then thus, after that, started the beginning when we finally, the sun started to rise for us again.
You mentioned a moment ago codependency, and again, this is another kind of important thread, I think, throughout your memoir. But for those who are unfamiliar, first maybe give us your working definition of codependency, and then some of the things you began to learn about that.
Yeah, oh gosh. I did not know what that meant at the beginning of this season of life. Brené Brown told me, you need to get the book Codependent No More. That's going to be your Bible. Trust me, you need it. And I remember thinking, God, that can't be right. I thought codependent meant like really needy or like very meek, somebody who just had no mind of their own at all. But I was like, well, that is not my deal. Codependent, until I started reading that book. And I mean, talk about an indictment. So essentially, and this is such a reductionist definition, so my apologies to everyone who could do this much better than me. But codependency is this misunderstanding that I am responsible for, in charge of, or in some way able to control anybody else's. Anything, feelings, behaviors, responses, choices, any of it. That is my place to exert control over what it is that they are doing. And then the way that that comes back is that codependency means whatever they are choosing, I am allowing that to deeply, deeply affect me, which is why codependents are marked by an insatiable, endless victimization, because it just keeps you there. It keeps you in this perpetual state of anxiety and victimization. I know what's best. I'm telling you how to behave better. You won't do it. Your bad choices are thus affecting me and everybody else. And here goes the cycle of just endless dysfunction. And so when I realized that, I had to reckon with the fact that I had been codependent my entire marriage. That I was, for 26 years, telling him how to behave, how not to behave, how to respond, how to do whatever I thought he was doing poorly better. And then when he still just did what he wanted, because he's a human, and that's how it works. We all just do what we want. We live our own lives, turns out. And we make our own choices, turns out. When I didn't like how that was going or it affected other people in our ecosystem, then because I'm codependent and I wanted to manage outcomes, I would go to that person or those people and fix it. Like, whatever that meant. I would polish it up. I would shine it up. I would razzle dazzle the experience. And I think the way that I wrote about it was I would try to rearrange the molecules so that that person wasn't experiencing what they were actually experiencing. So as you might imagine, this is not a useful way of being in a relationship with anybody. And so I started learning about codependency in the context of the loss of my marriage, as I was like, I got to figure out my contributions, and faced my own very toxic codependent behavior all those years. But then I was like, oh, damn it. Oh my God, those behaviors I exhibit with my kids. I have some of that with my friends. I have done that with my sisters. If you are codependent, you are. And it's your problem. And it's yours to fix, and it's not somebody else's fault. So if anybody wants to try on codependency, it's like 0 stars, okay? Not useful.
Yeah, I certainly have found Melody Beatty's book, Codependent No More, immensely helpful in working through so much of that. So thank you for that description. And kind of her prescription as, in effect, this invitation to take all that energy that I might be expending upon attending to other people and instead take responsibility for my own life. And you have at some point a line where you heard someone say, the trauma someone else created is not your fault, but dealing with it is your responsibility, which I think is a beautiful way to capture that, right? Is that, yeah, stuff happens. And then there's the question of what am I going to do? I can't fix it. I can't control other people, but I do have a responsibility even for attending to the way I am going to respond to this situation, which I found that super helpful. And a hard process, right?
Oh my God, it's terrible. I'd much rather control other people. than worry about myself. So 100%.
Yeah. How do you think codependency for you is or is not related to unhelpful definitions of love?
That's a great question. I think codependency has the capacity to absolutely sabotage love. In fact, it is love's enemy. And I've seen that in my own life. And so love in its pure form honors the autonomy of another human person. Love says you matter, and your agency over your own feelings and your desires, that matters. You count, and I will love you as you are. That's not to say that we don't also have challenging conversations and we work out dynamics, but codependency is the opposite of that. It is saying, I'm so unhappy with pieces of you. I hate them so much that I am going to make our relationship a living hell by trying to control everything that you do. And so it's no mystery that you walk that all the way out to the end of the pier and that relationship is in trouble. And so I think there's a difference between codependent behavior, which is about control, and then just good communication, which is about, we're having a difference here. Let's see if we can find resolution because we're on the same team. And we have the same goal, which is to remain connected. That is a completely different energy. It's a completely different approach than codependency, which is about control and then ultimately punishment. If you don't do what I want, I will punish you with either, it just depends on what your personality is. For me, it was withdrawal. I will remove myself from connection so that you will know how much I disapprove of what's happening. Terrible way to build a marriage. Terrible way to build any relationship. And so I can't think of a person I know that would not benefit from doing a little bit of homework around codependency. I think it's pretty insidious and a virus that most of us are infected with to some degree or another.
As we move toward a close, I'd love to hear you talk more about this last thread that I was especially taken with, the kind of a move towards friendship with yourself. You say at one point early on, I've functionally been my own meanest critic as long as memory serves. And yet in time, you began to move toward first a sort of tentative trust of yourself, and then in time, a sort of real loving friendship with yourself. As we think about that construct, what are key moments, key insights to help you move in that regard?
That's a real slow turning ship. That is not an overnight shift. It takes a while to get that perspective all the way down into your bone marrow when you have been like me. And I think this is some environment and some just who I am as a person, which is hard on myself. And my achieving impetus is just so high. And again, I've historically tied my worth, my value to what I am producing in service of other people and what they think of me. So that has left me reeling for decades. Because even when that is going well, even when I'm performing to everyone's satisfaction, it always feels scary. It's a house of cards that could turn in one day. And it has. I have experienced that. That is easy come, easy go. And so relocating the source internally of friendship, oh my God, it's so stabilizing. It's so generous. I find it incredibly hard. I do not have this lit, by the way. I am learning to apply the same gentleness and kindness and generosity that I can pretty easily apply to other people. That is not a hard reach for me when it comes to you at all. I am learning how to be that gentle with myself. And this is so crazy. This goes against all my evangelical upbringing. I'm learning to say to myself, hey, I'm proud of you. You've really done it. You made it. You were a good mom. And so that is new. I have never been nice to myself. Just that teeny little little atta-girl. I mean, if I was with my therapist, she would be like, let me guess, you want me to give you credit for that? And I'm like, I do. I'd like that logged in my notes.
They can give us credit sometimes.
Thank you. I've been trying to win therapy now for 5 years.
Well, this has all been a lovely conversation, and I'm so grateful for your willingness to share this with us and to share your journey, your own self-introspection and your own self-questioning in light of the trauma. And we're grateful for it.
Thank you. Thank you. What a nice thing to say. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate you reading it. Your genuine response to it means a lot to me. I'm not going to forget that. And I'm glad to be here and with your listeners. Really grateful.
Here's one closing take on today's conversation. First, two things I would have loved to talk about longer if we had had time. First, unlearning what we were taught about the body. Jen notes that she and others in her community were taught to actively distrust their instincts, that she is still learning to experience the world through the trustworthiness of her own body. I would have loved to discuss this more because to trust one's body and instincts seems to be a complex skill, which requires multiple considerations, a sort of nuanced interpretation, if you will. Her experience resonates deeply with my own, that is, not to trust the body and not to trust our instincts. And yet I also know that there are plenty of times and places where I, perhaps all of us, would do best not to trust our body's instincts. So then the question becomes how one best discerns when to listen and when not. Second, I would have loved to discuss more how the attempt and desire to quote, unquote, be good can block honesty. She said, when you have to be good to belong, then you don't want to face your own demons. This is a matter we've seen recur numerous times with NSE guests, that faith or moral commitments or a rigorous commitment to live a good life may unwittingly make it more difficult for us to face our failings and to come clean about them. This is a sobering contention, and it's worth a great deal of consideration and conversation. I'd like to close with one practice toward a good life that Jen highlights, this call to do some anti-codependency reps, if you will, to step back from control. Codependency, said Jen in her definition, is this misunderstanding that I am responsible for, in charge of, or in some way able to control anybody else's feelings, behaviors, responses, choices, any of it. It's an attempt, she went on, to rearrange the molecules so that that person was not experiencing what they were actually experiencing. So, one small practice for us this week. Notice one moment you're managing someone else's outcome, and then just gently return to your side of the street. That's a small but not so small closing take on today's episode. Peace to you, my friend. You've been listening to No Small Endeavor and our interview with 4-time New York Times bestselling author Jen Hatmaker on her newest book, Awake, a memoir of reinvention and recovery. We gratefully acknowledge the support of Lilly Endowment Incorporated, a private philanthropic foundation, are supporting the causes of community development, education, and religion. Our thanks to all the stellar team that makes this show possible. Christy Bragg, Jacob Lewis, Carrie Harmon, Jason Cheesley, Sophie Byard, Kate Hayes, Mary Evelyn Brown, and Audrey Griffith. Our theme song was composed by Tim Lauer. Thanks for listening, and let's keep exploring what it means to live a good life together. No Small Endeavor is a production of Tokens Media, LLC, and
Great Feeling Studio.